Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. I'm Zemo, the dad in DPS, and today we're back once again with another Skyline Valley weapon. And this one came from the scoreboard itself, otherwise known as the Head Hunter Scythe. But before we get into that, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. So, the Head Hunter Scythe. Now, this can be unlocked via the scoreboard, as I said, and once you can unlock it, you can then craft it at a workbench. Unfortunately, however, it comes with fixed stats, and that would be Assassins, Weapon Speed, and lightweight. Now, while the weapon speed and the weight actually are very, very good effects on melee weapons, Assassins isn't really, because the reality is, you don't need extra damage on human enemies. Typically, they die very quickly. Now, this could potentially be a very good PvP weapon in the future, but from what I've been told, there is a slight problem with that. Now, Head Hunter Scythe has a special ability, and that would be the ballistic bleed damage that we seem to have on there. Now, we don't know if this is a bug, we don't know if this is the way it's intended, but the reality is this weapon is meant to have bleed damage on it. So we'll see how that works out in the long run. If it is, not meant to have this weird grey area ballistic damage and instead meant to be actual bleed, then this could be very effective regardless of the Assassin's prefix. But again, we won't know until later on, until it's confirmed it's a bug or not. Either way, let's test it out and see how it works. So this is the build that we're using today. There's nothing incredibly special about it. We are using a full health melee build, mainly because I'm using my foreign armor in order to work with the bleed a little bit, but we're definitely going to see how it works. You can take a screenshot. That's the build we're currently using as a full health character. So, the Headhunter's Scythe. Now, I'm going to show you this weapon against some low-level enemies and some high-level enemies. You saw there that he just exploded after like a second. The bleed sometimes takes a little time to tick, and then we've got the foreign armor on there as well. And this is the thing where this weapon is at its strongest to an extent, is when the bleed damage can just tick around and kill things for you. You don't need to do anything additional. I just whack them once and they die. And this is against low-level enemies, so the lower level, easier to kill enemies will die to this fairly effectively and fairly quickly. But it tends to have more of an issue against higher level enemies with more resistances to ballistic damage, for example. And this is where you're going to see how different the damage scales. Now, I will point out that I'm not using any of the melee buff food. And you're seeing, while it does do ticking damage that will kill the enemies, it's also not particularly quick. And more often than not, you're going to be just quicker murdering them manually than, sitting around and waiting for the scythe to do its business. Now again, this could be because the ballistic damage on it is not where it should be. And this weapon, again, we are on a full health build, and we are just testing this out. This weapon will quite effectively one-shot these enemies for the most part if I was food buffed. It's not really that bad a weapon. But the thing is, the gimmick of it, the bleed that's on here, is the primary reason why I'd want to show you this. And as you can see, it's not really that ridiculous of a damage from it. And that could be because, again, it isn't functioning apparently, and this is all from other people, what other people told me, it isn't functioning apparently what you'd expect it to if it was an actual bleed weapon. It's not functioning like the bleed on other melee weapons, and as a result, it just doesn't feel particularly amazing in terms of the bleed side of it. In terms of the damage that the weapon does normally on its own without the bleed, it's actually completely fine. It's like any other weapon. The sad thing is it just doesn't have a good prefix on it that is usable in a kind of overly usable way. Like, literally, this weapon will one-shot some of these super mutants in here with the power attacks, because I'm not using melee buff food, as I said. But overall, the bleed just doesn't seem to be good enough for it to be the primary kind of reason to use this weapon. There's other weapons that will do more damage and have a better gimmick. Alrighty, so we have buffed up and we are where we need to be. Now, as you're seeing, like, it's not doing bad damage on Jeff. It's not the best damage on Jeff either. And we aren't a full health build. We aren't a unyielding build, rather. So we do have a slight disadvantage in melee combat. But it is a decent weapon. It does do decent damage to just regular enemies. It's just a case of the gimmick. The gimmick is the main point to use this weapon, and I just don't feel it's strong enough. And once we've finished with Jeff, we always come to the Queen. And the reason for that being is we want to see how this weapon does against a Titan. A monster that's armoured to ever-living crap. And you're seeing, like, again, the damage isn't bad. It doesn't, like, suck. It's just a case of this weapon is just not as good as others at what it does. And again, the gimmick is the reason I would want to use it, and it just doesn't feel like it's doing anything. I mean, look at that bleed damage just ticking ever so slowly. And this is the kind of thing. If a weapon has a special ability, and that special ability doesn't really do anything at the level you want to use it at, then it just feels like a wasted opportunity. And it just needs to either be buffed, or if it's not doing the bleed in the right way, like I said, it's meant to be doing ballistic damage in the form of bleed, then something needs to change in regards to it. But, you know, it could be a bug, it could be intentional, I really don't know. And with any video where I review a weapon, we take it to the expeditions. Now, this is where this weapon actually does a lot better. And the reason for that being is that the thorns here are really susceptible to damage over time effects. So you're seeing in this case, this weapon is absolutely fantastic for killing thorns. Like, they just do not do well against a combination of my thorn armor and this weapon. So for expeditions, this is actually a ridiculously powerful weapon that completely obliterates these guys. Like, this is just insane how much damage that this does to them just by existing. And again, this is on a full health build. I'm not using anything other than the same buffs I used against Jeff and the Queen. And you're seeing that, like, I've got ballistic weapons that don't do this to these guys. Like, I've got, like, some of the best weapons in the game that don't completely obliterate these guys in the same way. So this is a good weapon against them at the very least. And then you've got the humanoid enemies, which it's pretty much the same thing. Like, it completely annihilates them. They have nothing to resist this weapon. So I think its niche is expeditions. I think it's a very good expedition weapon. It could be the best one because it just does a ridiculous amount of damage over time to these enemies specifically. You know, flame-based weapons, any weapons that add poison and things like that, like, they all do a similar kind of thing. I don't know what it is about enemies in here. Maybe it's just they have, like, severe damage over time weakness. But look at this. Look at how much damage it does on a tick to one of these guys from near full health. If I could hit them less, I would, but I can't. And they just evaporate and die. So overall, I think the Head Hunter is an interesting weapon. The gimmick that it has, I don't believe in general use and general play is very useful. You know, against low-level enemies, it will, you know, completely annihilate them. But against some of the higher level threats in the game, some of the bosses, it's just not going to do what you need it to do, and it's just ineffective as a DPS weapon. But it does have the advantage in expeditions. It seems to do ridiculous amounts of damage through its damage over time effect, and it is going to absolutely slaughter everything you come across in this area. So it's an interesting one. It's not completely without merit, but I feel in the general game something needs to change about it to make it more viable in general use. But either way, not every weapon needs to be that way. So with that, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you all next time in the Wasteland.
Through the dark, moonlight's dimly shining, a shadow. intertwining a twisted mind, seeking prey to